Hey there. Today I want to tell you about something incredibly special, Georgian Qvevri wine. You know how some traditions are so valuable they become part of humanity's shared heritage? Well, that's exactly what happened with Qvevri winemaking, when UNESCO recognized it as an intangible cultural heritage in 2013. And trust me, once you hear about this, you'll understand why. So what exactly is Qvevri wine? Imagine a massive clay vessel, shaped like a giant egg, buried in the ground up to its neck. That's a Qvevri. The Georgians have been making wine in these vessels for around 8,000 years. Yeah, you heard that right, 8,000 years. When archaeologists discovered some of these ancient vessels in Georgia, with traces of wine residue, they realized they'd stumbled upon the oldest evidence of winemaking in human history. Pretty cool, right? These Qvevri aren't just any old pots, they're deeply woven into the fabric of Georgian culture. Every traditional Georgian home used to have at least one buried in their marani. That's their word for a wine cellar. It's kind of like how many people today might have a special family recipe passed down through generations, except this is a whole winemaking tradition that's been preserved for millennia. The religious significance of Qvevri wine in Georgia runs deep too. When Christianity arrived in Georgia in the 4th century AD, wine was already such a crucial part of their culture that it became naturally integrated into their religious practices. There's this amazing Georgian cross made of grapevines, called a grapevine cross. It really shows you how intertwined wine and faith became in Georgian culture. Let me tell you about these incredible vessels themselves. A Qvevri isn't something you can just pick up at your local pottery store. These things are massive. They can hold anywhere from 100 to 4,000 liters of wine. They're handcrafted by master potters who spend weeks shaping and firing them. The really fascinating part, the technique for making them hasn't changed much in thousands of years. The process of making wine in a Qvevri is where things get really interesting. Unlike modern winemaking, where everything's controlled and measured, Qvevri wine is all about letting nature do its thing. They crush the grapes and throw everything, juice, skins, stems, seeds, they call this whole mixture the chacha, right into the Qvevri. Then they let it ferment naturally with wild yeasts from the environment. No additives, no temperature control, just pure, natural fermentation. What makes this method so special is how the Qvevri's shape and the fact that it's buried in the ground work together. The egg shape creates a natural circulation of the wine during fermentation, while the ground keeps the temperature stable. It's like nature's perfect winemaking machine. The wines that come out of these vessels are unlike anything else you'll taste. White wines made in Qvevri are especially unique. They're amber-colored and have this incredible complexity of flavors. Imagine a white wine with the body and structure of a red wine, but with its own totally unique character. They call these amber wines or orange wines nowadays, and they've become super trendy in the natural wine world. The main grape varieties they use are ones you've probably never heard of: Kakheti for white wines and Saperavi for reds. These grapes have been growing in Georgia forever, and they're perfectly adapted to this style of winemaking. When you taste a properly made Qvevri wine, you're tasting something that connects you directly to thousands of years of winemaking history. Speaking of tasting, let's talk about what makes these wines so special from a sensory perspective. Because of the extended skin contact and natural fermentation, Qvevri wines tend to have higher tannins and more complex phenolic compounds than conventional wines. This gives them amazing aging potential and some really interesting health implications too. They're packed with antioxidants. Today, Qvevri wine is experiencing a kind of renaissance. While many Georgian families still make wine the traditional way for their own consumption, there's also a growing number of commercial wineries adopting these ancient methods. Some of the most respected natural wine producers in the world are now using Qvevri, and Georgian wines are appearing on wine lists at top restaurants globally. The tourism impact has been huge too. Wine enthusiasts from around the world are flocking to Georgia to experience traditional Qvevri winemaking firsthand. There's something really special about standing in a Marani, surrounded by buried Qvevri, knowing you're participating in a tradition that's been continuous for 8 millennia. But it's not all smooth sailing. The biggest challenges facing Qvevri wine production today are actually pretty practical. There are only a handful of master potters left who know how to make these vessels properly, and they can't keep up with growing demand. Plus, while the traditional method is beautiful in its simplicity, maintaining consistent quality for commercial production can be tricky. Despite these challenges, the future looks bright for Qvevri wine. More and more people are discovering these unique wines and falling in love with their story and character. The Georgian government is working hard to preserve the tradition while helping producers meet international standards, and new generations of winemakers are finding ways to combine ancient methods with modern knowledge. What's really exciting is how this ancient method fits so perfectly with modern concerns about sustainability and natural winemaking. Qvevri winemaking uses minimal energy, produces little waste, and creates wines without any artificial additives. It's like this 8,000-year-old tradition was somehow ahead of its time. This is why I find Qvevri wine so fascinating. It's not just about the wine itself, but about how this ancient tradition has managed to stay relevant and even become trendy in the modern world. It shows us that sometimes the old ways aren't just romantic notions. They can actually be the best ways, even today.